Doctor Who Season 1 recently ended, and with this season came the relaunch of the show, rebranding as a Season 1 as opposed to a Series 14. This was done so new people could easily get into the show, as it's a lot less daunting to start a Season 1 than a Series 14. But now that this season is over, did Rusty Davies and the creative team actually achieve their goal? If we look at the first episode we got for this new season, it's kind of the Christmas special. When you're watching on Disney Plus, this episode is essentially branded as episode 1, except in the UK it is not, making it a really odd episode to place because it's both episode 1 and not episode 1. It's not the actual starting point, and yet this story is so essential and pivotal to the rest of the season that it almost needs to be your episode 1. If you're in the UK and haven't seen Doctor Who before, or just saw this show and wanted to check it out, I feel it's a bit odd going and seeing that there's an episode, or technically 4, before the season even starts. To me, it's an odd approach to start the season with a special, especially when that episode is so important. As I've stated, this doesn't necessarily affect Disney Plus viewers, as it is labelled as episode 1, as it should be, but I feel like that doesn't give you a nice starting on point for new viewers. Usually you get specials after a show has already succeeded, and if you're watching something that's titled Season 1, that can be a little confusing. This season started with a 2-part premiere, and these 2 first episodes show a decent range of the show. You've got your average space adventure with your little bit of childish humour, and then you've got this episode that is essentially pantomime, but in television form, with a music god that has already ended the world by episode 2. It shows you the average episode of the show as well as some of the extremes it will go to. But starting with Space Babies, I think is a bit of a misstep. Although the show is a family show, it is very childlike in this, and there's definitely an argument to make. It should be targeted towards kids more, and so this first episode, if they're starting fresh, isn't a bad one to get the younger audience in. But for longer time fans, or even older people trying to get into it, some of the elements of that can just be a bit silly, and I feel like starting that as an episode 1 can be a bit off-putting. If you match this with some of the inconsistencies in the episode and how fast things move between the characters, it's an episode that almost has too much going on, although the story's quite simple, which for a starting point you don't really want. The Devil's Chord is generally thought of as a step up in quality, and whilst that is true, the episode makes you feel like you've missed something. As I've watched the 60th specials and the Christmas special beforehand, I knew all the knowledge I needed, but this episode brings up the events of the 60th specials multiple times and makes you feel like you need to watch those to understand it. You can easily get through it without knowing what that is. It's not huge details, but I could find that quite annoying if you're getting into a new show and you're getting told these things that the show thinks you know. When you have the 60th specials that aren't really branded as part of this new season, I think that's where the issue lies, because I feel like if you're referencing something like the Toymaker from the 60th specials and those events being pivotal for this next season, why isn't that stated to be required viewing? Continuing with the series, you have a quarter of the episodes without the Doctor. 73 Yards is a great episode in its own of the show, but your main character's not there. And you go to Dot and Bubble, and he is there enough that it's not a complete lack of the Doctor, but he's not the main character. So you're just left with 6-7 episodes to connect to him, and that's definitely enough to like him, but I'm personally not that attached to him just yet. The episodes we did get in this season are very vast in their genre and themes, making it hard to pinpoint what the show's about. I know that has always been Doctor Who, but there's something about this season that almost feels like it's too different every week. There doesn't feel like there's a consistency in the style of writing an episode I'm watching, which I feel like for the most part is there in the earlier seasons. We go through time and space, but it always feels like Doctor Who, whereas episodes like Dot and Bubble and 73 Yards, even Devil's Chord, they don't really feel like Doctor Who episodes to me. The Doctor and Ruby in this as well, I think it's hard to actually gauge their true character because of how little conflict they have between them and how friendly they are from the get-go. I know by now you're probably bored of hearing this because it's a common criticism of the season, but they are too friendly and they are too cooperative. There's no tension because there's no conflict, and each episode is fun and there's conflict in that themselves, but the conflict's never actually about them or relating to them. When you look at some of the past companions that people love, you have that. Donna Noble instantly challenges the Doctor in Fires of Pompeii. She hates how he is just going to leave this place and she forces him to go back, and you can see by the end of that episode that it emotionally destroyed her that he actually could do that. And you see that develop throughout this season, with Donna changing the Doctor for the better. And you have the same with Clara in season 8. You start the season and she doesn't want to go with this Doctor because he's changed, and she gives it a go. And yet she keeps finding herself hating the Doctor until she gets to a breaking point where she cannot stand him anymore. He has gone too far and she had to step away. And that just caused tension. The very next episode, you could tell there's friction between them, and that episode was more exciting because of it. You don't have that in this season. I enjoy the characters on the surface level, and they're fun, the energy's there, but there's nothing more to them in each episode, really. Not to mention that the villain of this whole season is a returning villain from the original series of Doctor Who back in the 70s. I feel like rebranding this as a new beginning and then having the finale rely on the reveal of this old villain that nobody is going to know if you're a new viewer. That just doesn't make sense to me. I enjoyed Sutek in the scenes we had him, but it could have literally been any other villain for this episode and this two-part finale. The reveal was cool and was great for classic fans, but the reveal was the cliffhanger for The Legend of Ruby Sunday. If you've never seen this show before, that cliffhanger is probably not that cool for you, because why would you care, and you don't even know who that is. I could have maybe saw the Daleks being the big villain, or the Cybermen, something that people who haven't seen the show may know of. It's an iconic villain, and so it's perfectly plausible that people have heard about them before even getting into the show. That would have made more sense. This character coming back just does not work if you're trying to relaunch the show as a season 1. Combining everything I've said in this video, I feel like there has been a misstep here in making this a new season 1. There's just too many elements of the season that go against the new viewer in a way that puts them off of the show, that it just isn't successful at doing what it intended.